Well, welcome back, everybody, and thank you to everybody who watched the FinTech pitch off during the lunch break. It was absolutely fascinating to see some of the new players um, who were showing us their amazing new startups. Now, in our next session, we are going to be discussing coronavirus, everybody's favorite subject, and really tackling the question of whether it is permanently accelerating the fintech trend. So joining me to discuss this is Keith Gross, head of UK at Plaid, an API infrastructure platform.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Keith, how's it going?
Great.
Excellent. And we also have Antoine Nouguet, head of commercial at payment processor checkout.com. Hi, Antoine.
Hey, Daniel. Hey, Keith. How are you?
Great. Two fantastic different backgrounds, I might say, for both of you.
I know I was going to say, Antoine's putting me to shame with all of his academics behind him. I like it.
It was just for the talk.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that we haven't had anyone, experiencing a delivery driver knocking at the door or a young infant sort of bursting in, but I accidentally played doubled up on my audio, so apologies if that was a bit confusing for anyone. So let's crack on with the session. I really just want to start by asking, perhaps Keith, you could kick us off. Do you think coronavirus, this period we're in, really is a watershed moment for fintech? It certainly feels like that.
Yeah, I think in a short answer, yes. I think fintech was already on a great path here, but what coronavirus did by forcing everyone into their houses is you took entire populations that hadn't used fintech before and essentially forced them to use it. I think one of my favorite stats is in March and April, the fastest growing segment for PayPal was people over 50 years old. People had never used a fintech app before are now using that every day. And you're seeing that across a whole range of use cases. And that extends from both consumer into small businesses. So I think what COVID really did is bring an acceleration of a trend that was already happening. But I don't, you're going to see some drop back, but I don't think it's going to go drop back to pre-COVID levels in terms of the acceptance of fintech. People have realized the value it can bring to their lives, the value of access, the efficiency of these use cases, and being able to bank from your phone. I don't think that's going anywhere when we go back to the real world after this.
And Keith, Plaid, not that anyone really ever mentions it, but obviously started the year with some big news around the acquisition, obviously by Visa. But how would you describe how the year has gone? For you guys.
Yeah, it's been a year of change, I think, like it has been for everyone. Obviously, we started with that news in January and then rapidly went into work from home mode, as I think every other company has. And we've stayed work from home the entire year. So obviously, there's just an adjustment in how you run the business. But otherwise, it's been honestly an incredibly busy period for Plaid and for open banking platforms in general because of this increase in demand for fintech. So we've had all sorts of people reaching out, and we've been supporting groups like small businesses that are trying to get Cybles loans here in the UK or payroll protection program loans in the US. So it has been an incredibly busy period for anyone in the open banking space.
And Antoine, for you over at checkout.com, have you experienced sort of a different commercial environment, and has that led you to think that we are at a sort of watershed for fintech?
Clearly, and I think that Keith summarized it perfectly. The restriction of the pandemic have accelerated the trend of people buying or consuming products and services online, and I think that being able to buy your daily provision or access banking services online has become a necessity for many people since COVID. So there is a real opportunity for fintech businesses to really step up to the plate and prove their worth.
And is that something you've seen very tangibly, at your company? Is it something that you've sort of really seen, has there been any uptick in certain metrics or any interesting trends that you can share?
Massively. We process for a lot of retailers, and most of the retailers, they have a split, obviously, between the traffic that is in store and online. And we've seen a massive spike in online transactions, which is good for us.
So I guess really, the question is, has this sort of brought about a permanent shift? Keith, what do you think about that?
I think, as I said before, you're going to see some adjustment back to, some more people buying offline once we get back into normal cadence of life, and an increased use of cash, which has obviously dropped off a cliff, for example, during the the coronavirus epidemic. But I don't think you're going back to the way it was before. If you look at the increased penetration in e-commerce, the increased adoption of some of these new fintech services, those are sticky habits, especially if people are using them for 6+ months. They're going to realize the value there. And I don't think that it's going to go back to the way it was before. And I think, we obviously operate in a slightly different space from checkout, but we've seen obviously that this impacts different segments of fintech differently. You had huge rises in people signing up for investment accounts. And on the other side, you've had alternative lending has had a really tough time because of obviously the risk of defaults around this. So it is impacting different parts of the fintech ecosystem differently, but I don't think it's going to go back to how it was in January when we come back on the other side. There's going to be a new watermark in terms of the acceptance of doing all your banking and financial services activities online.
Antoine, what do you think? Are you pretty bullish for future growth in 2021?
Yes, yes, I am. I think that I think it's all about. It's going to be about. It's going to be about convenience. The fact that you can now, like we said, access your banking online, or you can do your grocery online. If you, as a consumer, think it's better for you or it's just more practical, you will simply keep on using that methodology. So it's just a shift of habits that is happening, and consumers will simply use what's best for them. And this will eventually also drive a lot of changes for fintechs, because they will have to adapt to that new demand and these new challenges as well.
I just want to talk about some of the other kind of breakout areas that I think are relevant in 2020, and I think some of them have a sort of coronavirus relationship, whereas others maybe are just long-term secular trends. But something that we have been really interested in here at AltFi is just the sort of the budding of the subscription economy. Obviously Netflix and Spotify have been around for ages, and I think what is different now is that we're starting to habituate more into seeing more and more of our lives, our financial lives, taken up by these sorts of things. Keith, what do you think about that whole area, and how does it fit into I guess Plaid's sort of plans here in the UK?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's definitely been a proliferation of subscription offerings across a whole range of ecosystems now. I don't know about you two, but I feel like I've subscribed to 10 or 15 Substack newsletters in the past year, and that seems to be the fintech thing. But and Plaid also has been focused on this area. We've built standing orders payment functionality into our API offering here in the UK, so you can pay for subscriptions via faster payments, open banking transfers. So it's definitely something that we support and we see moving forward. I would say that there's definitely a limit at some point where you can get subscription fatigue, and there'll probably be a rebundling at some point across a lot of these different industries. At some point, it doesn't make sense for someone to have 50, 60 small $1, $5 subscriptions. And so that can't continue forever. But right now, we're definitely in the early part of that wave where it does feel like it's a business model that more and more fintechs, be it neobanks, investment apps, PFMs, are looking towards. And there's definitely going to be some winners that come out the other side of that.
Antoine, what's your sort of sense on the subscription economy and how it sort of relates to fintech? I guess obviously we've seen, as sort of Keith alluded to, a few of the neobanks start charging for monthly services. But what's your interpretation as a sort of payment processor?
So as a payment processor, the subscription economy was already something that we saw being accelerated before the pandemic. I'm sure that I'm not the only one getting 10 different recurring charges at the beginning of the month, and it's just because it's more convenient. And businesses in different industries, such as food and beverage or even retail industries, are looking for new revenue streams. And that's driven, of course, by the lack of foot traffic in their shops. So subscription can be a good solution, and we definitely see more and more businesses shifting that way.
Sorry.
I think the only counter, or not counter argument, but the only other point to make here is the same trend that I've also seen is a lot of budgeting applications starting to surface your subscriptions more actively. So I think the idea of going down a subscription model because you're hiding the cost to a user, that's going to go away. And so at some point, it will be everyone figuring out what's the right subscription level for me to get value out of this, because it will be more and more obvious in the budgeting tools people have access to, what are the recurring payments that I'm subscribed to.
I agree. And I think that companies are trying to be more and more transparent. I saw that Netflix was canceling automatically the subscription for users that were not using Netflix. So I think companies are going to have to be more transparent on the long term as well. But there's definitely a change.
Really, really interesting. I'd love to hear more about both your respective companies' plans. But I also thought, to stay true to the session title, it'd be interesting just to talk a bit more around, what's it like working for a fintech in coronavirus period, and obviously how that relates to company and industry success. Do you feel, Keith, that fintechs have sort of stolen a bit of a march on larger companies involved in financial services in whatever fashion? Is there something kind of in the DNA of startups that they've been benefiting from in this period?
I think probably yes, and I think that just comes down to the fact that they've probably started with a tech stack that easily moves to a work from home environment where most things that you need to do your job are on your laptop already, whether you're an engineer or on the business side. So for us, it was actually a relatively smooth work from home adjustment. And I think people that were used to having desktop computers in an office with a lockdown intranet, it was a much harder shift to go to work from home. So in that sense, I think fintechs probably do have a little bit of a step up. But at least for ourselves, for Plaid, we're excited about the company culture of an office, and we're going to go back to an office environment once it's safe to do so. So I don't think, at least for us, we're going to do the permanent shift to work from home. I know some other companies have considered that. But I think what this has taught you, no matter what your company plans are longer term, everyone needs to have a plan for at the flip of a switch. If I wanted to go work from home, could I make that happen? And I think a lot of more large traditional companies are now having to rewrite those plans given this experience.
Antoine, what are your thoughts on that? Has it been a relatively smooth sort of transition for you guys?
So we have an international presence. So we're used to communicating with different time zone and not being in the office. So yes, the transition was fairly easy. But like Keith was saying, I think we're missing being in the office, the interaction, connecting on your computer in the morning and having then 10 Zoom on a daily basis is a bit too much. And I think we all miss that social interaction. But we've adapted and we had to anyway.
Yeah, I mean, appreciate it's probably the hardest question out there at the moment. But what did you guys think of the Pfizer news yesterday? I mean, appreciate it's a sort of more personal question rather than a corporate view. But what were your thoughts?
I think for myself, at least, it's exciting news, great news. I think everybody would love a light at the end of the tunnel that we're going to be able to overcome this pandemic and get back to the real world. But I think there is also a sense of needing to temper that with reality. Just the distribution problem of getting the vaccine in the hands of everyone is going to take a long time. So even if you had something approved tomorrow, it's not like the risk goes away overnight. So I think at least what I'm telling my team is great news, but let's be patient and let this take the proper course.
Antoine, how about yourself?
Agreed. I think step by step, it's definitely a good news because we need a vaccine in order to be all back in the office and to feel more confident on a daily basis. But step by step, let's see how it goes.
Absolutely. Okay, so I mean, just pulling back to fintech specifically, embedded finance is a term that we've also noticed is sort of trended alongside coronavirus. Not sure there's a strong link there, but Keith, what are your thoughts on embedded finance and how much of a sort of interest is it for Plaid?
Yeah, it's definitely an interest. So if you think about what Plaid does, I guess I should have given a 30-second discussion at the beginning, but we're an open banking platform, right? So we create a suite of APIs that other fintech apps can use to build services based on top of bank accounts and financial data. And embedded finance is essentially taking that idea, and instead of building a single fintech app, building some of those services into an existing application where users already are today. And when you think about what happens when you move into a mobile first world like we are today, that's actually a great way to get distribution for financial services. If TikTok launched a bank account, I'm sure a lot of Gen Z would sign up for that. And that's what embedded finance is. And so I think the difficulty is going to be figuring out how do you do that safely? How do you educate consumers? How do you provide the right security and protection for data, which is something that Plaid is personally very passionate about. But as a trend, I definitely see that happening. And I think it will continue to happen and ultimately should lead to good competition across fintech, traditional financial services, and other tech companies, ultimately to benefit the consumer, in my opinion.
Antoine? I agree. I think embedded finance, whether it's a buy now, pay later or lending, it provides consumers with more convenience, faster transaction, and a better customer experience. So with more commerce than ever happening online, I think we can only expect the consumer demand for this type of services to rise.
Okay, well, I have loads more questions, and it would be great to chat much longer, but I think that is all we've got time for. So I guess really just say, Keith, Antoine, thank you very, very much, and we are very excited to see what both your respective companies will be up to next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Coming up next, we have a very exciting panel discussing, I guess, one of the most pertinent subjects in fintech at the moment, if not the most, profits and increasing revenues in general. So very excited to hear that.